Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be interviewing Emily, a cancer genetic counselor, because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I'm sure that genetic counseling does not get the attention that it deserves. One of our moms, Katie Kirk, you might have heard of her, did an amazing job this month on promoting getting tested, getting medically tested. But along with cancer screenings, I think that genetic testing is very important. This is a conversation not just for October, but for all year round. On a personal note, I myself have had breast cancer 25 years ago, and I've been genetically tested twice. But I'm excited to hear from Emily about what's new in the genetic testing world, because I think the last time was 10 years ago for me, but obviously that's important for your children and your grandchildren, in my case, et cetera, and not just for females when it comes to breast cancer. So Emily, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And this is a topic I'm super passionate about, so I'm really excited that we're having this conversation. So as Sharon mentioned, my name is Emily Goldberg, and I'm a genetic counselor. I work at JScreen, which is a national nonprofit, and we do a lot of education and awareness about the importance of genetic testing. And platforms like this to just get the word out about what genetic testing is, how it might be useful. And we also offer genetic testing. So we can sort of talk about that at the end, but we do at-home genetic testing for hereditary cancer.
Wait. So I'm going to stop you because this has to be a conversation. You mean you don't have to go sit for 17 hours in those labs in the hospitals anymore?
You don't. You can do it from home.
Like, is it like a blood test, or is it like a urine test, or saliva? What is it?
So it's actually done by saliva. So people basically go online to jscreen.org, request your kit. We have a family history questionnaire that we have people fill out. So it's important for people to be aware of their family history if they know it, and ask things like, what type of cancer have people had, how old they were, did they have cancer more than once? So they fill out a questionnaire, and then we send them a kit in the mail, and it's a tube, and they spit into it, and it goes right back in the mail. And then a couple of weeks later, once those results are ready, then they meet with myself or one of the other genetic counselors, and we go through all those results.
And they can do it virtually?
Virtually, yep. So it's by phone or video. So I see people all over the country.
And how much does that cost?
So the cost of testing is $199, as long as people submit insurance, even if insurance doesn't cover it. But because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we wanted to just make it as discounted and accessible as possible. So we currently have a code that people can use, which is BCAM18 for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And people can do testing for all of October for $18.
Okay, well, that's very important. So we should probably talk about that. But what if you can't afford either $18 or it's not October? Then what happens?
So, and you and I talked about this at some point earlier, that October is a great time for awareness, but we need to be thinking about this stuff all year. And we have financial assistance. So we're a nonprofit, and we have financial assistance. We often have different grants and community events. So we don't want money to be a barrier for anybody. So if it's something that people need, they can contact us. We have funds to help cover testing for people who can't afford it otherwise. So we don't want that to be a barrier at all.
So why and when, that's a very big question that I'm going to ask, do you suggest genetic testing? Like, I don't have the gene as of my last two tests. So does that, I mean, I know that for my kids, they take my age -7 or something for a mammogram, but if you don't have the gene, are you in the normal pool if you've had cancer?
You mean for screening?
Pardon me?
For breast cancer screening?
For any kinds of screening, if you don't have the gene, are you kind of like free, like get out of jail free card kind of a thing with Monopoly?
Not necessarily.
No?
So cancer is something that we call multifactorial, which means we know there are genetic influences, but we know there's also environmental influences, hormonal influences, so all these other risk factors that sort of come together. So what I recommend is for everybody at around age 25 to have a conversation with their doctor about risk factors. And that can be things like, what does your family history look like? Have you or anyone in your family ever had genetic testing? What's your, ethnicity? What are your other health concerns? What kind of other exposures have you had in your lifetime? So
Right.
most women are not going to start screening at 25, but 25 to 30 is a good time to start having the conversations, because if it turns out that somebody is high risk, you don't want to find out 5 years after you should have started screening.
Now, yeah, that's true. But I was thinking that this was going to be I was going to end with this, but I think I have to go into it right now.
Yeah.
I believe in knowledge is power. And I also believe that ignorance is bliss in certain situations.
Yes.
So I specifically, I'm giving you my personal story.
Mhm.
Got tested for whatever the panel was. It was a very long panel, but I said, I don't want to, this is 10 years ago. I don't want to know about pancreatic cancer, because at that time, at least, and probably now, but at that time specifically, it was like, there was nothing you can do. So
Mhm.
like, it's almost like I have this like little thing, this little, like, if you knew you had 3 days left to live, would you like do everything in 3 days? Or would you rather just not know? I'd rather
Right.
just not know. I have done a lot of things in my life. So I spend time with the things I do. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
So I wouldn't want to go to Paris. Like, I have been to Paris, but I wouldn't even want to go to somewhere I've never been, because I'd be too anxious to enjoy it. So
Yeah.
how do you weigh anxiety, having the gene, and what the knowledge empowers you to do?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And I think that that's I think that's something that a lot of people think about when they're doing genetic testing or deciding whether or not they want to do it. So your first point is exactly right. Knowledge is power. And the point of genetic testing is to identify people with an extra high risk for cancer so that we can take that information and do something with it. So things like extra breast cancer screening, or starting at an extra young age, or if somebody has a high ovarian cancer risk, we talk about risk reducing surgery. If somebody has a high colon cancer risk, we talk about younger screening and more frequent screening. So when we say knowledge is power, that is really a strong statement, because there's a lot we can do if we know. Now, that being said, finding out that you have a genetic change and a hereditary risk can be really overwhelming, and you can't unknow it, right? So you can't go back and say, you know what, it turns out I didn't want to know about my genetic risk.
Right.
Let's rewind. I don't want to do the test.
You've seen all those episodes of Grey's Anatomy and everything, where
exactly.
Like, oh, I have this. Yeah.
Right. So you can't close Pandora's box. Right. And that's why we recommend that people sort of think about it, meet with a genetic counselor, think about some of these issues ahead of time. And we know ourselves and our mental health best.
Right.
And so for some people, genetic testing is not the right fit for them. They'd say, you know what? I had a patient actually tell me once, I'd rather live 10 years and never think about cancer again than live another 40 years and think about it every day.
Well, that's what I was saying about 3 days, kind of.
So I think it sort of depends.
But depending on the cancer, because
yes,
there are cancers that you are predisposed to that you can say live for 40 years and not think about it every day, because you've cured it or whatever.
Yes.
Right.
And that's part of being proactive and, saying there is a lot that we know, and even things we don't know today, we may know in a year, or we may know in 5 years. We've seen technology and screening and just our knowledge about cancer screening and prevention change so drastically.
Right.
But
I'm sure your genetic testing, I should probably redo it. Could I have been negative and then be positive now because of the way you test?
Yes.
Ugh.
So I know, sorry. So when you were tested the first time around, my guess is that it was for just BRCA1 and 2, and it may have actually been only for specific genetic changes that we see most commonly in people who are Jewish.
It was on the first one, but the second one added all the advanced.
And then they sort of added in, the rest of the gene, maybe other genes. But it's become bigger and bigger as the years have gone on. And we know that there's families out there where we say, this really looks hereditary, but it's not BRCA. We don't know what to tell you, do your extra screening. But now, to give you an idea, the panel that we have at JScreen is 63 genes.
Okay.
Not all of those are specifically breast cancer related.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I know. Yeah, I think I did that one minus pancreatic cancer. I literally said, just take that off. Or whatever it was. It was like, I said, get rid of them.
Yeah.
But now, you know what the thing is, though, is that well, me personally, you know, I have theories about my specific cancer. Every single person on my street where I grew up had cancer,
Mhm.
different kinds. Every single one of us that is my age, because
Yeah.
they sprayed the crops. They
Yeah.
sprayed.
And we
So
know
I think mine was
those
my
exposures
mental.
make a difference. So it
Exactly.
certainly could be.
I mean, I'm telling you, literally everyone, like everyone that's
Wow.
born in 1955 or 1954, every
Mhm.
single person. So, and then once I didn't have the gene, it kind of like confirmed, you know, I was like, oh, this is kind of, you know, I think that that's probably true. It could be, it could not be true, but if the kids get screened, it almost doesn't, you know, like it, does it almost not matter, or am I making that up? If I think I don't have the gene and my kids are constantly getting screened, does it matter if I know?
So not necessarily,
Good question,
although
right, Emily?
yes.
That was a good question.
So first of all, your kids get half of their genes from the other side of the family.
I know.
So when we're testing somebody, you know, we ask about both sides of the family. And
But you don't need both sides to get cancer, do you?
No.
It doesn't, it's not like the blue eyes, brown eyes. You don't need both of the like.
Nope. And it
little
generally is only from one side or the other.
Right. So it almost is irrelevant unless the other side has genetic cancer as well, right?
Right. Right. So
yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, our children can get something from their other parent, even if we do our testing and we're negative.
Right. But if you both have it, then the kid's chances are way higher.
It could be, yes. And we've seen
mathematically it has to be higher.
Yes.
Even if it's small percent, it has to be higher.
Yes. And actually I've, you know, in all the people that I've tested, which is a lot, it's not an insignificant number of patients that I found that are positive for more than one genetic change.
Right. And wait, goes back to my theory where ignorance is bliss. What does that mean? Explain, give us patient X and tell me a story.
Okay. So, well, first of all, I want to address the pancreatic cancer for a minute.
Please, because I might be off base, you know.
Yeah, no, totally. And pancreatic cancer is one that scares a lot of people, understandably. It's a tricky cancer to get and treat, and does not have, at least for now, a high survival rate. If we were having this conversation 5 years ago and somebody tested positive for a genetic change associated with pancreatic cancer risk, we'd say, you know, unfortunately, there is no screening for pancreatic cancer that's standardized for now. That actually has changed recently, that for people with certain genetic changes and certain family histories, there is some screening that's now available. Mm-hmm. So it's not a total, you know.
So let me just tell you, this conversation is giving me so much anxiety. I can't even begin to tell you. I'm a very anxious person to begin with. And I have a lot of knowledge and I know a lot about science and I respect what you do. So that being said, it still is like flipping me out, but it flips me out anytime I take a test for anything, because I know it's important to do, but it makes me very anxious to do it. So
yeah, no, and that's totally understandable. And it's a high stakes test.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, it's one that you can't unknow. And unlike a lot of areas of medicine, it's not just about that one person, right? So when I'm doing genetic testing on somebody, I'm there with them, you know, I'm walking them through all the information about what that means for them, and I'm taking care of them. But it has a lot of implications for other people in their family as well. So it's really a family affair when we think about doing genetic testing.
Right. So have you been genetically tested?
I have.
Do you want to share your results or not?
Mine, unfortunately, was all normal.
Okay. All right. Has your whole family been genetic tested?
Nope. Some are more open to it than others.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. So, you know, some share the perspective of, I want to know. Others are like, you're crazy. No, thank you. So, you know, it's really it's a very personal decision on what.
Are there genetic tests? I know the answer, let's say with breast cancer, right?
Yep.
Where you get that test result and you can actually, I know personally someone that has saved herself because she knew about that she had the gene.
Yes.
Okay. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So actually I know 3 people, not one. And so breast cancer is like kind of winner with genetic testing, right? Because you get it before, right? I remember in the old days, ovarian was kind of like pancreatic, but it's not anymore. Like if you get it right.
Yeah. So
because you can remove your ovaries if you choose to. I know women that have done that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's actually the recommendation for a lot of genes. And I want to tell you, that's the recommendation actually for a lot of genes that we test for. So there's actually a woman that I work closely with. She runs a different nonprofit called My Faulty Gene. And her name is Kathy.
Yeah.
And she had a strong family history, lots of women in her family who had breast cancer. And then she was diagnosed herself. And then years later, she ended up doing BRCA testing and was found to be BRCA1 positive.
Mm-hmm.
And this was years after her diagnosis. And then she went and she had her ovaries removed as prevention, because that's what was recommended to her. And they found stage 1 ovarian cancer.
Right.
And stage 1 ovarian cancer is not something that you commonly see.
Right.
And so she basically started her foundation going off of the idea that genetic testing saved her life, that she would not have known about that ovarian cancer until it was stage 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so, she has this goal of getting out there and helping to get people tested and help fund it if needed. So she's really such a prime example of, by knowing what she was at risk for and being proactive, she saved her own life by doing that.
Okay, so now I have some other questions.
Yes.
Obviously, at least to my knowledge, I'm Jewish and I'm Ashkenazi.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have higher rates of ovarian and breast cancer, or is that just kind of rumor?
So that is true. So anybody can get cancer. Anybody can have a hereditary cancer risk, but we do know that Ashkenazi Jews have a higher rate. We actually find that about 1 out of every 40 Ashkenazi Jews, regardless of their family history, has a BRCA1 or 2 mutation.
Right. Wow, 1 of 40.
1 in 40. So that's about 2.5% of all Ashkenazi Jews. So it's about 10 times higher than the general population.
And are there other cancers that are higher in other ethnicities, or is it just Ashkenazi Jews?
There are certain genetic changes that are more prevalent. We also know that there are certain cancers that we see more. So there's a higher rate of aggressive breast cancers in young Black women. And we think, potentially there may be a higher rate of genetic changes. So we're working on figuring that out. So
you don't have proof of that.
So there are studies that show that there's a higher rate of something called triple negative breast cancer, and potentially higher rates of BRCA1 and 2 genetic changes.
So you only know this for a fact genetically for Ashkenazi Jews? That's the only group of people that have.
So we have a lot more data specifically for Ashkenazi Jews, but we know it is dramatically higher than the general population.
That is so that is literally the only group you have the data on?
It's the one we have the most on, yes.
Your group specifically, or all genetic testing?
No, sort of from years of research about BRCA1 and 2.
Why did they decide to start to do it with Ashkenazi Jews? Like, how did that happen?
Because so when they originally started saying, it looks like cancer could run in families. Right. They were basically taking large families with just these massive family histories of young, aggressive breast cancers, in conjunction, oftentimes with ovarian cancer, and basically just trying to find the most high-risk families to give them the highest risks of identifying these genes. And it happened to be because of this high rate that a lot of those families were Ashkenazi. And then there was a big study that was done in Israel.
So not Sephardic
to look at that data.
Just Ashkenazi Jews, not Sephardic. So it's from where we were from? Like Russia, Poland?
Yeah, so we think probably there's a lot of overlap between Ashkenazi and Sephardic, but it is most specifically in people with Ashkenazi background.
Interesting. Okay, so what would you say to people listening about genetic testing? Give me your overall view of, I know it's what you do for a living. I know it's, first of all, I think it's extremely interesting, even if it's just like, where did I get my brown hair?
Exactly.
Why am I anxious? Great. Okay, that's cool. But like, what would you say to people about why they should get genetically tested? Well, I'm going to give you a lot of questions. Answer them in any order you want. Who should get genetically tested? And what happens if you test positive and you have no funds, no resources, nothing?
Okay. So first of all, why? I think because a lot of people, everybody's different, but a lot of people do want this information, and they may have seen family, friends, loved ones having gone through cancer. And, for them personally to say, you know what, if I knew that I could find something, or I could test for something that would tell me specifically, what my risks are, can I be doing anything extra to lower my risk, or to do better screening so that if something's there, we can find it at an early, more treatable stage.
Wait, I want to stop you. You said cancer, but what about Parkinson's? What about, other diseases, heart disease, whatever?
Yeah.
Do you only test for cancer?
So at JScreen, we do hereditary cancer, and we do what's called reproductive carrier screening. So that's for people who are planning to have children, and they want to know if they're at risk of having children with a genetic disorder.
Like Tay-Sachs, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So things like Tay-Sachs, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, where usually we don't know that a parent is a carrier, but if two parents are carriers and they get together and they both pass it on, then they can have a child with these.
Cystic fibrosis is genetic?
Yes.
I never knew that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never known a child that has it, that has a parent that has it.
So the parents don't have it. They're carriers.
Oh.
Which means they're totally symptomatic.
They almost always don't have it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Huh.
So we have 2 copies of every gene because we get a set from each parent. And being a carrier.
Sickle cell is the same?
Sickle cell is the same. Yeah.
Now I never thought, I know people that have had, unfortunately, those diseases. I've never thought about what you have, that the parents haven't had it. So of course, how would they know? Because they haven't had it.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so they sort of stay hidden.
Wait, if they test positive, let's just say sickle cell, or whichever, cystic fibrosis, can they figure out if their baby has the gene before, like, I know it's probably controversial, but like, is that?
Yeah, totally. So if 2 parents are both carriers, let's say for sickle cell disease,
or
every time, or cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs, every time they get pregnant, there's a 1 in 4 chance of having an affected child.
For all 3 of those diseases?
Yes.
Okay.
And hundreds more.
Okay.
So it's 1 in 4 chance for every pregnancy. There are things people can do. So they can do genetic testing during a pregnancy and know whether or not the fetus is affected. They can do testing after birth to figure out if that child has that genetic condition. There's also an option to do something called in vitro fertilization, IVF. And
pick the embryo that doesn't have the gene.
Yes, and do genetic testing on each embryo and pick ones that don't have the genetic condition that you're worried about.
You need 2 Jews, yes?
So no, so anybody can be a Tay-Sachs carrier. It is It is most common in people that are Jewish.
Can anyone be sickle cell?
Yes, so sickle cell is also most common in people with African ancestry, but anybody can be a carrier for anything.
And cystic fibrosis is definitely anyone could be anything, right? It's not associated with an ethnicity.
Yeah, so cystic fibrosis is most common in people who are Ashkenazi or European, but anybody can be a carrier. And that's why we recommend genetic testing for all individuals who are planning to have kids, because we really have no idea what we're carriers for.
Wait, so you're saying to me, genetic testing should be, even if you're not both Jewish, if you're not both African, descent, if you're not both, whatever you said was for sickle cell.
Absolutely.
You recommend that for any 2 people?
Any 2 people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yes.
And a lot of these genetic conditions.
It was very expensive. Let's go back to now again with the whole, people that don't have money, first of all, if they test it for it, and let's say they can afford the test, what do they do with the information? Like I'm throwing it back to you because what do you do with the information if I don't know, a tsunami's coming? Like, how do you get out quick enough? Like, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, and it depends on, what the information is. Certain things are actionable. Like if you know that you're at risk of having a child with sickle cell disease, you can do things like IVF. You could use an egg or sperm donor. You could do genetic testing during a pregnancy. Yes, that is expensive. There are some,
kind of, not everybody can.
Not everybody can. That's definitely true. There are some organizations out there and some funding at state levels that can help with fertility treatments, but it's a challenge sometimes for people who, maybe their insurance will cover it, but but they haven't shown that they have infertility. So why would we cover IVF for you? So it's really
I
hard
have a
for a lot of
question.
people.
So let's say there was people of childbearing years and they
Mhm,
wanted to get genetically tested for their baby, but they didn't
mhm.
want to do the whole cancer screening and everything. Can you pick and
Yeah,
choose
they're
what you
separate.
want?
They're definitely separate,
Is it like a menu?
pretty much.
When
Yes.
you spit into that thing, do you pick, like, do you check what
You
you want?
pick ahead of time. So when you go to request a kit, you can
Oh,
either do reproductive carrier screening, or you can do hereditary cancer testing, or you can do both.
huh. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I could talk about this for hours because you could see that I love science. I'm very interested in it. If you could give everyone listening a quick takeaway, I
Yep.
mean, I still kind of remain firm on what I would want to know and what I don't want to know. Like,
Yes.
I haven't changed my opinion after this conversation.
Totally fair.
Although, I've acquired more knowledge. Like, I didn't know about, for the people of childbearing years. I didn't know.
Mhm.
I'm sure that my genetic testing is not up to snuff, but since my kids, or what, like my kids know when I had it, like, you know what I'm saying? So like,
Yep.
they're not like living, they're getting screened anyway, and we're lucky enough to be able to afford screenings.
Mhm.
So, I'm okay with it, so to speak. And, pushing 70, like, I'm okay with, like, I get checked.
Yes.
But I do want to know what you think would be the biggest takeaway and why we had this conversation and how we can help the most people.
Okay. So great. First of all, I think why we're having this conversation is really so that we can save lives. If somebody is watching and they say, even if they don't do genetic testing, but they say, you know what? I never asked my parents about the family history of cancer. Or, I
I
remember
know,
they
I
had
wish I
something.
did. I don't have anyone alive that remembers. I'm like one of the
Yeah.
oldest in my family now. So
Mhm.
like, I don't like, they're like, well, she had cancer, but we don't know. Like, maybe it was a lady part, like that, no
Yes.
one knows.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't know, but also there's a lot of people who, especially in past generations, wouldn't talk about it. There was a lot of confusion about where cancer came from. People didn't want to say the word cancer.
But they never wanted to say the word. It's like
Yeah.
the C word.
So sometimes, there's just really limited information. But I think it's important for people. And, Thanksgiving is next month, families around the table to be like, you know what, we should have a conversation about the family health
I
history.
like that. I like that.
And not
Now,
even
wait,
just
wait, but
cancer,
I want to stop you for
heart
a second.
disease and
I
things
have
like
very
that.
good friends that are adopted, as is my first cousin.
Yeah.
So genetic testing might be good for them because they don't know the genetics of their birth
Yes.
parent, correct?
Yeah. So when we were, it used to be that genetic testing was thousands of dollars and not
Remember?
available to most people. And even if insurance covered 80%, you still have $1,000 copay or something like that. It was really not accessible to a lot of people, but it's become much easier, much cheaper to do testing. And when we were designing the JScreen program, we said, you know what, I don't want people to have enough relatives with cancer to be eligible for testing.
Right. What is
We don't want
JScreen?
to wait until
What does
everybody in your
J-
family has cancer.
Full disclosure, what does the J mean? Because I don't even know.
So originally JScreen was founded to do Jewish carrier screening, reproductive carrier screening, when it wasn't available in most of the country.
Mhm.
So about 9 years ago.
Okay.
But now since
It's
genetic
open to
testing,
everybody now.
but now it's everybody. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And since genetic testing isn't specifically checking for only markers that are Jewish related, it's really available to everybody regardless of background.
So I love
Um,
the idea of Thanksgiving. I think that's such a cool
yeah.
idea.
And for
Plus the
people
fact that,
who
like,
have,
we can't just only do things for 1 month.
yeah.
Everyone's like, let's do this for October. Let's do this for December.
Mhm.
Let's, do a food drive for December. But what about November? And what about January?
Mhm.
So, I think consistency, like, I
Yes.
try to be consistent. Like, the one thing I'm consistent with is my walking, but like,
Mhm.
I think consistency yields results. Like, I think
Yes.
that's what matters. So,
And that's why we'll do this again in, June or July.
oh, no, I said, yeah, Mary came up with we should do it before the summer, for sure.
Okay,
Like,
good idea.
nobody's
Yeah.
thinking about genetic testing and breast cancer during the summer. They're
Yes.
just going to the beach.
Right. So
So,
before they get to the beach,
yes,
we'll do it
exactly.
again. But
Well,
yeah, for people who have small families, maybe their families mostly men, maybe, they're out of touch with their families or they're adopted. They lose some of that history. So genetic testing, it doesn't replace everything,
but it gives them
give
something.
back a piece of that
Yes.
pie.
Well, you know what? I think it was a pleasure to talk to you. I
You
mean,
too.
you're still making me a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie, but I do think knowledge is power. I do think ignorance is bliss when needed, and resilience, denial. I mean, I believe in all of it.
Yeah.
So like, I'm a smorgasbord of beliefs. So
Well, they're all valid human emotions that we all feel.
yes, I totally agree. And if do you want to ask, I always let people ask me a question at the end, not a I mean, I don't care if you ask me about cancer, that's fine, but not about my family. If you have anything you'd like to ask me, I'm very happy to answer it. I always feel when I interview someone, it's only right to ask them if they have anything that they
I
want
love
to
that. Well, I think, one thing for people watching, especially during October, is, for people out there who are maybe newly diagnosed or going through their own treatments, any advice you can share from your own journey or anything you would have wanted to know during that process?
I have a couple of things. My kids used to say to me, like, because I would say, oh, so-and-so has breast cancer. And they go, didn't you have breast cancer? I'm like, oh, right, I did. Literally, my ability to be in denial is ridiculous. Two things I had that I would recommend. One is I had a woman that was my friend that had breast cancer like 5 years before me, and she was like thriving. And so I would like call her name was Laura. I would call her like once in a while, like, hey Laura, like, what's going on? You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. I'm like, okay, that was, well, I have a couple things that I really liked. I had no hair because back in the old days, it was like the big guns of adriamycin, which I don't necessarily regret at all because I felt like
did its job.
Yeah, exactly. So I wore different colored wigs. So like that was, I had to do that because I'm a very flashy person. And the third one is for me, I went to two doctors. One was like this very chill, relaxed gentleman that like would say to me like, if you do this, I promise you're going to be fine. Now no one really promises cancer, right? And the other one was a very famous, I won't say her name, she's fantastic, female, brilliant doctor that was actually referred to on Sex and the City. And she's fantastic, but it was like a giant practice with a million people.
Yeah.
And I was so much, and I'm a very big person in life, but I was so much more private about this. I call him Michael. I don't even call him doctor. I loved going, my doctor's Michael Van Scoy Mosier, and I don't even know if he's still practicing, but I love him. And he was just very not afraid to tell me the truth, which was his truth. And it was amazing to hear.
Yeah. And it makes such a difference to have providers that you trust, that you can sense care about you and sort of have, you have to have that vibe with them.
I think this female doctor was brilliant. Don't get me wrong. It was the scene. It was like going to like a disco. I felt like it was like, but it was just too many people. It wasn't the kind of place where I wanted to hang out.
Yeah. You have to be somewhere where you're comfortable.
Exactly. It didn't help my denial being in a room full of other people.
Yeah, that's true. That would interrupt it.
Yeah, I'd say denial, resilience, obviously family, people around you. But, I don't know. I just think, I think it's a rough one. I mean, cancer is not fun. So, but I think early detection is literally the key. So genetic testing, early detection, I'm a believer. Awesome. When you can. And I'm hoping that everybody can afford to do all this. So, I mean, certainly I hope your group will at least, anyone that's listening that wants it, I hope you will make sure they get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, it was so nice to meet you, Emily.
All right, you too. I'll see you again before the summer.
You will.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.